You're watching BionicDance. Don't run on automatic, instead, please think.
My name's Jennifer Fulwiler. I was a lifelong atheist, and I'm now a Christian.
Well, you'll have to forgive me, Jenny, but I don't buy this. In fact, I'm calling shenanigans.
Shenanigans! Shenanigans! Shenanigans!
Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. As previously stated, this is Jennifer Fulwiler, but for multiple reasons, I suspect that Jenny isn't being genuine with us. Have a look.
I never believed in God, not even as a child. When my dad would come read books to me at night, I believe I was in 4th or 5th grade, and our nightly reading was Carl Sagan's Cosmos.
Okay, stop, hang on. I'm glad you like a book.
But some part of me is going, well, isn't that convenient? Just as Neil deGrasse Tyson's revamped Cosmos comes out, some atheist converted to Christian claims that her dad used to read her the original as a bedtime story. And realistically, which 4th or 5th grader is going to put up with that? No, Daddy, don't read me the story about the fairy princess. I want to hear more about black holes and nebulae. I'm sure there were probably some, but I bet the proportion is much smaller than the majority. And what are the chances that this atheist converted to Christian just happened to have been one of them?
So I was very much raised on a diet of science and reason and evidence-based rational thought. You believe what you can prove. I believe that I have hands because I can see them.
And now she hits the most common atheist objection to faith in the existence of God. It's almost like she was coached or something, her lines written for her.
And so this very rational worldview always made sense to me on a fundamental level.
But then something happened to make you decide that rational, empirical thought wasn't the way to go, right? And if one atheist can do it, by golly, all of you can, right?
Before I got to the point that I could really start researching faith with an open mind, something had to happen.
So, atheists don't research faith with an open mind? Oh, the shame of it, our unwillingness to believe in things for no good reason.
And for me, that occurred after my first child was born. I looked down and thought, what is this baby? And I thought, well, from a pure atheist materialist perspective, he is a collection of randomly evolved chemical reactions.
Well, isn't that special?
So let me see if I got this straight. A self-declared empirical rational thinker whose dad read her Cosmos at the age of 8 looked down at her newborn son and spouted the most common creationist argument ever?
Inconceivable!
The likelihood that this isn't a church-scripted bullshit story is dwindling by the second.
And I realized if that's true, that all the love that I feel for him, that it's all nothing more than chemical reactions in our brains. And I looked down at him and I realized that's not true.
Come on, look at this treadmill. Tell me that ain't God.
And what we have here is the logical fallacy known as appeal to emotion. It's when someone uses feelings instead of facts and evidence as the basis for their argument, and it holds about as much water as this pasta strainer.
I didn't know where to go from there, but that's what prompted me to start researching topics of spirituality.
So the way to go from being an atheist to being a theist, apparently, is to pop out a couple of kids.
I got my books about Buddhism and, and about every religion except for Christianity, basically. I assumed that anything could be true except for Christianity.
And here we go. We all know just how much Christians love being persecuted, and now all of a sudden it's an underdog story with Christianity as the plucky young misunderstood one who has to beat the school bully in the karate tournament. Honestly, this story could not be more perfect than if the church had written it themselves. It's like the fluffy bunny mommy version of that God's Not Dead movie. Does anyone else think she's kind of breaking that 9th commandment? Anyone?
And my husband, who considered himself a non-practicing Christian, said you might want to start with the one major world religion whose founder claimed to be God. After all, that's a really easy claim to disprove if it's not true.
Now, let me see if I got this right. Someone who allegedly lived 2,000 years ago and who claims to be a god that demands faith instead of providing evidence is going to be an easy claim to disprove? I mean, it's pretty easy to say, wow, you people are kind of nutty, aren't you? But disproving it? Allow me to introduce you to my friend the invisible pink unicorn. I want you to prove he doesn't exist. And are you seriously telling me that someone who grew up as a logical, empirical, rational, scientific thinker doesn't know where the burden of proof lies? It's the Christian's job to prove their God is real, not yours to disprove it. And you'd know that if you are what you claim to be.
I was such a through and through atheist that I have to admit I was ignorant of all these great Christian thinkers.
I see. So a quote-unquote through and through atheist has never done their research, never looked into Christian thought. You do realize just how many now atheists have done the exact reverse of your story, who started out as Christians and became atheists specifically because they did their homework?
What about Thomas Aquinas?
No. There'll be no Thomas Aquinas at this table.
And when I looked at evidence like that, on the whole, I started to think something explosive, something world-changing happened in first century Palestine.
Maybe, but that proves that the reasons for it were supernatural. How?
You have this guy named Jesus who comes from a lower class region, gains a bunch of lower class followers, and ends up being executed by the Romans.
Remember that part about the underdog story and just loving to be persecuted?
And yet in droves, you see thousands and thousands of Jews giving up these traditions that they had held dear for thousands of years.
No they hadn't. True, Judaism had been around for thousands of years, but those particular individuals who converted, decades at best. And you converted. A lot of now atheists who used to be theists converted. Why couldn't they?
And the people who joined in on this new religion, there was no benefit for them. It was a persecuted religion. People who joined this religion didn't tend to work out too well. They tended to lose social status and often face death.
So somebody has to have a guarantee of social, economic, or material benefit before they'll stand up for their rights or join a group that isn't the majority in power? If that were true, nobody would join a picket line or a protest or the military or a rebellion. Nobody would stand up for their rights or their beliefs.
But I wasn't yet convinced and ready to become a Christian. And so I started a blog. I just threw out every hard question I could think of.
You also apparently threw out your J key.
I just put it all out there on the blog. And as I would watch the atheists and the Christians go back and forth and debate, I realized we atheists, we don't have the lock on reason that I thought we did.
We atheists? I love how all of a sudden atheists are a we, just as you're trying to describe a deficiency in the community. Very subtle manipulation, but not subtle enough.
But what I saw with the Christians was they had that too. They had all the knowledge of science and material world that we atheists did.
Uh-huh. Okay, little Miss Cosmos, can I direct your attention to something like creation, Genesis, Noah's Ark, virgin births, resurrections, water to wine, walking on water? Yeah, Christians got a real handle on that science thing.
But yet they had the total picture of the human experience, of love and triumph and hope, and they could articulate that in a way that the atheists couldn't.
And once again, we have ourselves the appeal to emotion fallacy. It doesn't matter if Christianity leaves you feeling spiritually or emotionally fulfilled, that doesn't make it true. And most of the time when an atheist is arguing against a theist, it's about whether their religion is factually correct and not whether we as atheists lead satisfying or fulfilling lives. Those are two separate issues.
It wasn't until after I had made the intellectual decision to become a Christian that I think I finally believed it in my heart.
Oh, please. Given your description of your experiences, you didn't make an intellectual decision to become a Christian. Oh, yeah. And my heart pumps blood. I do my thinking with my brain.
When I set my pride aside,
yes, that's right. It's pride that keeps atheists from being Christians.
And said, okay, I feel like I'm talking to myself, but Jesus, I want a relationship with you. I want to know you.
Well, I don't have a personal relationship with Jesus. I mean, we got a beer once, played a little pool, but I can't say I know the man.
This peace entered my life, this joy, the way my whole being was transformed. There was just no question that this is somebody real.
Appeal to emotion doesn't make it true. You know the drill at this point. This story could not have been more perfect without being written by the church. It is exactly the kind of atheist conversion story they want to tell, which is why I suspect it's not true in the least.
I think that not only am I more alive now that I'm a Christian, but I'm so much more intellectually alive. Finally, nothing is off limits.
Except, of course, anything to do with birth control or homosexuality, eating meat on Friday, doing work on Sunday, denying the Holy Spirit, taking God's name in vain.
I can ask questions about science, but I can also ask questions about the spiritual world, and I'm free to really seek the truth.
Seek the truth? That's rich. Now, let's recap here, because what we allegedly have is a formerly empirically thinking atheist who looks at her newborn son and says, gosh, there has to be more than science. She tries every religion under the sun except for poor old Christianity, then tries being a Christian and goes all gooey over it. Now she's just the best Christian ever. And what? This is supposed to convince atheists that God is real, that Christianity is true? Or maybe shame us into being just like her? Does anyone out there in YouTube land think that this isn't a steaming pantload of church-manufactured hooey? And if she really is telling the complete and honest truth from her personal perspective, what reason has she given to think that she's not completely deluded? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm calling shenanigans. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.